Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Mindset Mondays with me, Muffy Mendoza of Brown Mamas. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going live today from my desktop or my laptop. So the screen may look a little bit different. But that's not going to stop us from getting started. So, since I'm going live from the Brown Mamas Facebook page, if you're not following us, follow us on at Brown Mamas on Facebook. So / Brown Mamas. And today we are going to be picking a card from the Mind Check deck. If you don't know what the Mind Check deck is, it's the set of cards that I have that I created for Black mothers. And they are basically cards that will ask you life watering questions every day to help you to just get your mind right. And so today I just picked the deck. I was like, all right, it's Mindset Mondays. I'm going to pick a card from the deck and we're just going to go with that. And so the card I picked today was this one, which says, who would you be if you were loved the right way? And so we're going to go with that. And of course, you know, the Mind Check deck is actually a companion guide for the Brown Mama Mindset, which is my book, my latest book that I wrote for Black mothers. It is a blueprint for Black moms on life, love, and home. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to be talking about who would you be if you were loved the right way. And so really what we're going to be talking about this Mindset Monday is, what is your relationship mindset? And there are really some common themes that go through the Brown Mama Mindset book. And I would say the most common theme is accountability. I don't think that we are capable of loving properly until we are first accountable for our own actions. And sometimes that means that we have to go back and really ask ourselves, who were we when we began our relationships? Were we someone who was being loved the right way? Because if you were not being loved the right way at the beginning of your relationship, it is really, really likely that you took a lot of residual buildup from pain, from confusion, from hurt, from mental clutter into your relationship. So therefore, it's really going to take you being in your relationship to get rid of some of that. And so I wanted to talk a little bit today about accountability. The other theme I wanted to talk about is complementarity, and which I think is a big thing for African American mothers in particular, or women in particular, because a lot of times we are not learning what complementarity is. I've heard so many of my girlfriends, so many of my friends go into a relationship saying, you know, we need things to be 50-50. We need, this needs to be equal sharing of responsibilities, when the reality is that is not the realness of a relationship. The realness of a relationship is sometimes you may have to do 100%. Sometimes you may have to do 400%. Sometimes you might only be doing 25% and your mate may be doing the other 75%. Because what ends up happening in a relationship is you have to get a feel for what each other's strengths are. Hey, LaTanya, thank you for tuning in. You have to get a feel for what each other's strengths are. And as you get a feel for what each other's strengths and weaknesses are, you realize that you may have to compensate in some areas, hey, Lisa, for your mate, and he may have to compensate in some areas for you. I talked last week when we were talking about, what did we talk about? Last week we talked about operating in your feminine power. And I talked about what had happened over the last few months. As some of you guys know, this has been a really busy year for me. I did a TEDx speech. My book was featured at the Essence Film Festival. Hey, Shakia. I also put on my first show, the Brown Mama Monologues, which we will be announcing the auditions today after Mindset Monday. So make sure you stay tuned for that. And it was a busy year for me. So I stopped doing the cooking in my household because I'm a stay-at-home mom. I've been a stay-at-home mom for the last decade. And I used to do all the cooking, but it was becoming too much for me. So I asked my husband to fill in, and he did. He started cooking, and he had been cooking the meals for the last 3 or 4 months. For me, it felt like giving up part of my feminine power. But what I know for sure is that in a relationship, sometimes that just happens, yo. Sometimes you just cannot be all you can be. And sometimes he cannot be all he can be. So that demands complementarity. It does not mean that one of the reasons why I kind of despise feminism is because it asks that things be equal. I am not equal to a man. A man is not equal to me. I am a woman. I have specific things that I do well. He has specific things that he does well. And I would like to also say, you know, a man can have feminine energy at points and a woman can have masculine energy at points. That does not make me any less female. That does not make me any less woman. But sometimes my husband may have to come in and be the nurturer when I'm incapable. And sometimes, you know, as Black moms, sometimes we got to go in and be the disciplinarian. So it's all about realizing who you need to be when you are loved properly. So I wanted to read, and of course I lost my excerpt, but I'm gonna find it real quick. I wanted to read a short excerpt from the Brown Mama Mindset because I think this perfectly just describes what it's like to be loved the right way and what actually happens in the body, in the soul, in the mind of a woman when she is loved the right way. And if you've been following me throughout the last 6-7 years that I've been doing Brown Mamas, you know that I will openly admit to being a horrible wife when I first got married. And so the chapter 13, which is called To Be Loved, kind of chronicles that journey of going from being a wife who was just not a good wife to being a wife who is a good wife. I'm a good wife now, right, Mikkel?
Yes, ma'am.
He said yes, ma'am. Okay, so that works. Hey, LaTanya, thanks for coming in. You're coming from Texas. Thank you, from Texas, sister. So I'm going to read this excerpt from chapter 13 of the Brown Mama Mindset. It's called To Be Loved. And it says, with my husband's love, I stopped seeking to be right and began seeking to listen more. His genuine care for my well-being made me more patient with my children and willing to understand their perspectives. My man's love helped the me that had been buried since childhood shine again. His love did not complete me, but his love did free me. It freed me from the thought that I deserved the consequence of not being loved. It opened me up to receive love, and once my love cup began to overflow, I became one who could freely give love. This is the kind of love that us brown mamas deserve. We deserve to be loved in a way that opens us up. We deserve to be loved in a way that releases us from the thought of relationship conditions and consequences. We deserve to be loved through our madness and mistakes. We deserve to bloom into what women who can give love from the overflow that which has been given to us. So I read that because I think that that's really important. I think in our society, what is happening today is we are mistaking materialism, control, what I like to call fakeness, the face value of relationships, what you see on Facebook every day, people posting their love. We are mistaking that for love. Because what love actually does for you as a woman is it opens you up to be accountable to yourself, to be accountable to that inner calling that is deep inside of you. Because what happens when you are not loved properly, especially as a woman, but I would venture to say probably as a man too, but I can't say because I'm not a man. But as a woman, what happens when you are not loved properly, whether it be by your parents, by your mates, by whoever is supposed to be loving you, what happens is you begin to hide. You begin to hide who you are as a human being. And then instead of being accountable and authentic about what you really want in your life, what you really need in your life, you begin to make excuses for yourself. And you don't do it because you don't want to live in your best life or in your best purpose, but you do it because it's no different than a flower that's blooming. If the seed is in the dirt and it's not getting what it needs, then it just stays dormant. What you really are, who you really are, stays dormant. So I think it really takes for a man to love you properly for you to really bloom as a woman and to really become who you're supposed to be. And then you can really operate in extreme self-accountability. Because I can honestly say that until I encountered my husband, and I don't even like to say it's because of the marriage, but it was because I never felt like anybody besides my mother loved me unconditionally, let alone somebody of the opposite sex. But once I had that love, I stopped trying to be the girl who wants to be wanted. Like, it freed me up to be the woman I wanted to be because I no longer had to worry about somebody loving me. So once I kind of got that unconditional love, then it was like, there's actually a part in that chapter where I talk about putting my husband through the ringer, like all the stuff that I would do. I would fight with him and cause arguments just so that I didn't have to deal with myself. And a lot of times when we're not loved properly, that's what we do. When we don't love ourselves properly, first and foremost, that's what we do. Because there's nothing worse than having a mountain of problems and seeing that you're the only one that's causing them. Or should I say there's nothing better? Because then you have to go back inside and you have to be accountable for your actions. When you've been loved properly and somebody is loving you unconditionally, you have no choice but to look at yourself in the mirror. And if the place where you are loving someone from is not from a place of accountability, then you really don't love them. Because at a certain point in my relationship, what happened was I got to a point where I said to myself, I'm tired of hurting him. it's making me look bad to myself, and I'm watching him go through the motions trying to please somebody who cannot be pleased. And so then the accountability came in. And then after the accountability came in, the complementarity came in out of empathy. Because once you are accountable for yourself, once you are operating from a love mindset of accountability, then you have no choice but to love from what's on the inside. And so if I'm seeing him and I am experiencing him consistently being accommodating for my life, then I have to be accommodating for his life. And I think a lot of times, especially with our single sisters, what's happening is there is a certain yearning and want for love that's not coming from the inside. It has to come from the inside. And that's why you have sisters that got a mountain of standards. What standards are you keeping for yourself? And are those standards based on materialism? Are they based on the outward appearance of love? Or are they based on those real fruits of love? You know, the long suffering, the patience, the empathy. Is it based on that? Because if that's what you're basing, if that's what you're living on the inside, then it has no choice but to shine on the outside. And then so therefore the energy, the vibration that you're putting out to the universe has no choice but to return to you. Fivefold, tenfold, in fact. And so a lot of times as women, we have to realize that until we can get accountable here, if you don't have a man to love you unconditionally, then you have to love yourself unconditionally. And from the well of that unconditional love, then you start to emit vibrations that line up with relationship, that line up with complementarity. And if you don't understand complementarity just means where you're strong, I'm weak, and where you're weak, I'm strong. And you flow with that in your relationship. And different strokes for different folks. Like everybody's relationship works a little bit differently. There's intricacies inside of a relationship that are different from person to person because every person is an individual. But there should always be this concept, this idea of complementarity, this idea that you as an individual don't live on an island. And therefore you cannot express the highest state of who you are without that masculine, feminine, yin and yang complementarity. It's necessary. It's not something, I hate when people say that, complementarity can be expressed in a different, should I just say in a different way? It cannot. Masculine and feminine are integral. Like they need to be together. That is the only way. That's the only way to produce seeds. That is the only way to produce life. For you to produce life by masculine and feminine energy becoming one. And so it's the same thing in your relationship. Your relationship mindset has to be one where you are working not towards competing with your mate, not towards trying to be your mate, but towards complementing your mate. And that does not mean that he has to be a specific type of man and you have to be a specific type of woman. Because some men ain't gonna be your HGTV guys. That's just not who they are. You have to accept them for who they are. Now, that does not mean that they cannot rise to the occasion, because I don't believe that any person is incapable of doing anything. We were put here with divine energy, which means our energy does not flow from material. It does not flow from flesh, really. It flows from spirit. And so if we flow from spirit, then we have to be able to accomplish much more than what our physical bodies can. We think our physical bodies can accomplish. We can actually, science shows that we're only using 10% of our brain functionality. So if we're only using 10% of our brain functionality, we got to keep pushing those limits. So there's really nothing you can't do. But also, life is really about being empathetic. And so if you know your husband is not a handyman, you can't force him to be a handyman. Now, what you can do is create conditions right for him to have those type of experiences. And that means being patient, being kind, being loving, but it also means setting the stage, cooking a meal, making sure that he gets to have that experience from a place of comfort, whatever his comfort is, whether it's food, whether it's sports, put a TV next to the picture frame you need them to hang up, whatever it is. But that's complementarity. Complementarity is realizing I'm not a man and I cannot have a man's experience. But what I can do is I can fill in and I can help him to reach that higher level for himself. And so that's really what I've got today. It's Mindset Monday. It's 12:15. I told myself I was not making these videos over 15 to 20 minutes. So that's what I got today. So thank you for tuning in for Mindset Monday. Our question today was, who would you be if you were loved the right way? So the answer to that is, if you were being loved the right way, then you should be a person who is accountable, who has no problem operating in feminine energy and being a complement for her mate, who has no problem being empathetic and having empathy for her mate and empathy for herself. So let's first remember that all of these things have to be coming from the inside out. They cannot be coming from the outside in. You cannot be empathetic for your husband if you're not empathetic for yourself. You cannot be accountable for your mate, for your friend, for your date, if you are not being accountable to yourself. And you cannot be a compliment who doesn't understand how to operate in feminine energy from the inside out. And that means operating in a spirit of invitation when necessary. So that's what I got for y'all today. Thank you so much for tuning in for Mindset Monday. Don't forget to share the video. Don't forget to go on brownmamas.com and get my book, The Brown Mama Mindset, a blueprint for Black moms on life, love, and home. And also the new Mind Check cards. It is a deck of cards that has questions that you can ask yourself every single day to get your mind right. You can find all these things on brownmamas.com/shop. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, LaTanya. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Shakia. Thank you, Brandy. I appreciate y'all. And y'all have an awesome, beautiful, and blessed day. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.